The purpose of this paper is to explore the response of the church and wider society to the rise of Trump and Farage and the phenomenon of the far right. I plan to do this by examining the commonalities between the policies of both men, concluding with a theology of advocacy urgently required to address the escalating challenges we see not only on our doorsteps, but, as Nadia has rightly pointed out, globally. I don't have time to explore all the worrying features that reared their head during Trump's inauguration, but I do want to reference four. First, the signing of an executive order banning diversity, equality, and inclusion DEI programs in the federal government, fulfilling a pledge Trump repeatedly made during his campaign. There are two anti-DEI executive orders. The first ends the DEI programs established under his predecessor. He had ordered all federal agencies to come up with equity programs. The second executive order broadly ends any DEI activities within the federal government. The order overturns a handful of executive orders from past presidents, including from Lyndon B. Johnson, signed during the civil rights era. The second concern, the presence of the tech billionaires. Present were Amazon founder, Meta boss, Apple leader, Google chief. They were all given prime seats at St. John's Church. Media tycoon Robert Murdoch was also spotted at the church. To ensure that Trump's policies, indeed their policies, are communicated far and wide, these tech giants will put millions and millions of pounds towards Trump's campaigns. The third worrying feature concerns free speech. Trump signed an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and ensure free speech. The order claims that the federal government had previously infringed on free speech rights under the guise of combating misinformation. If free speech is free speech, this will give further rise to race crime and the absence of accountability for the crimes committed. With the prospect of free speech, discriminatory language has the possibility of becoming even more normalized. The fourth, Donald Trump was sworn into office on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Throughout the inauguration, the name King was mentioned. Trump believed that his draconian and discriminatory policies were consistent with King's inclusive theology. The inauguration was curated such that one would think Trump was building on the legacy of King. This was a disgrace. Employing King's justice and peace narratives to advance a campaign that demonstrated scant regard for the poor, migrants, Black and brown people, is not only a contradiction in terms, but demonstrates the absence of respect Trump has for Black and brown people. Whilst looking at the theology and praxis of Trump, we would be foolish not to also engage a similar practice with Farage. Farage has pledged to introduce an immigration tax forcing employers to pay an increased national insurance rate of 20% for every foreign employee compared with the current 13.8 figure. He also wants to end illegal immigration and vastly reduce legal immigration by leaving the ECHR. All non-essential migration would be frozen in weeks. Illegal migration would be deemed a national security threat. Farage is also proposing a ban on newly arrived migrants receiving benefits. The deeply worrying thing about this landscape concerns not only last year's race riots, but according to the Independent newspaper, Nigel Farage is on course to unseat more Labour MPs than the Tories at the next general election, with his UK Reform Party surging in the polls. And just 6 months after Reform UK formed a bridgehead in Parliament with 5 MPs, the survey revealed it would win 76 seats if an election were held now, with 60 of these currently held by the Labour Party. This puts the race riots and social political situation into a context, as I'm pretty sure there is a correlation between the race riots and the rise of reform. Our interpretation as Black and brown people clearly differ from those who align themselves to reform. As Black and brown people, we rightly felt that violence was being done to us. They, on the reform side, would have argued that they were safeguarding British streets and were on a quest to make Britain great again. Considering the latter perspective, which reform promoted in word and action, a rise in membership during this period should not surprise us at all. But here is the question. How should the followers of Jesus respond to this phenomenon? Among the many things we Christians need to do is to develop a theology of advocacy. Such we see played out in the New Testament. There we witness the gradual yet resolute unfolding of a new humanity previously seen in opaque forms in the people of Israel, but now comprehended with vivid brilliance in Jesus Christ. The Son enters the world to demonstrate a deeper picture of this advocacy, taking on not partial but full humanity, quietly working from the inside out to reconcile the cosmos while demonstrating God's love for humans, even to the point of death on the cross. Jesus, we note, begins his formal ministry by announcing his commitment to the poor, freedom for the prisoners, and recovery of sight for the blind. He fulfills these words through acts of healing, teaching, and sacrifice, ultimately dying for the world. The first thing that stands out from the ministry of Jesus is Jesus does not advocate from a distance. He comes near. All throughout Scripture, God works silently from behind the scenes with a discourse representative of wisdom speech in songs and parables and other languages that simultaneously reveals and hides. God's advocacy is not co-opted by the powers in the world, but works in silence through human vulnerability and, yes, humanity, such as we find in the story of the Incarnation. With Jesus' entry into the world, a clear picture of God's advocacy comes into sharp focus, one that helps us appreciate the extent that God goes to advocate with and on behalf of others. He will not just advocate for them, but with them. Jesus walks into the facets of the world and reorients the structures for their true purpose. He stands before economic systems, family units, land and agriculture, and brings them under his lordship. Jesus' repeated use of the word kingdom implies social political implications, as if to say salvation must not just attend to the personal matters, but a broader context. Thus, the New Testament word kingdom describes God's commitment and transformation of all things, including the political terrain. In playing out such a kingdom, Jesus attacks the symbols of his day while establishing new ones through liturgies of sacrifice and the forgiveness of sin. Ultimately, the pathway to power involves suffering and death. What the Romans publicized as fear, the cross, ultimately became the symbol of power and supremacy for the Christians in the empire. This means we witness the full scope of Jesus' advocacy. It is a radical advocacy with risks to himself. He eschews comfort, refuses to conform to the status quo, and shows for all to see the extent of advocacy. With the resurrection, Jesus continues to advocate for humanity and not from a distance. In last year's Sam Sharp lecture at Queen's College, Reverend Dr. Carlton Turner reminded the audience in eloquent fashion of the numerous Black people, many from church traditions, that had engaged in various advocacy methodologies. He said, I quote, "Legacies of God in the African Caribbean are not confined to the theological ideas and concepts. Peoples of the region have resisted the historical weight of colonial oppression in multiple ways. Across the region, almost every island has had slave revolts and uprisings, some of them key to the dismantling of slavery. It strikes me that our ancestors were reflecting the image of God, advocating not from afar, not from a distance, but close up and personal, and using holy methods and strategies that sought the emancipation of the oppressed people. So in conclusion, I have attempted to provide a framework employing Trump's inauguration as a paradigm and compared this with the policies of Farage, concluding with the question, what must be the response of the church and other faith communities? The answer, advocacy. And on the matter of advocacy, it is fitting for one of our most significant Black prophets of our time, Professor Robert Beckford, to have the last word. In the book titled The Sam Sharp Lectures, History, Rebellion and Reform, edited by Dr. Alicia Lewis and Rosemary Devison, in the chapter titled Deliver Us from Evil, Professor Beckford says this: finally, Sharp possessed what most Black Christians today have neglected: the ability and desire to protest. Historians have spent a great deal of time and energy trying to work out whether the protest was intentionally violent. But this perspective misses the point. The point for Sharp was not that protest is not only a legitimate practice in the face of oppression, but also a fundamental tactic for social transformation. Beckford concludes with the fitting words that encapsulate the purpose of our gathering today. He said, "No protest, no change. No protest, no change."